What if Glock weren't so busy making carbines that they still spent R&D money on their pistols? What if the company wasn't based in Austria, but America, I don't know, say headquartered in Texas? And what if I told you the Shadow Systems Foundation series picks up the torch for Glock and has refined the design to a level that would make the Austrians envious? Are you ready? Stand by. Welcome back to the Humble Marksman channel, the only gun channel here on YouTube dripping with that BDE. That's right, Big Dad Energy. If having kids has completely broken your taste for Chick-fil-A and it is the last place that you would pick to eat, go ahead and hit that like button. I don't even ask the kids where they want to go eat anymore because I'm sick of Chick-fil-A. Like, it's enough. Dude, I've been there like a million times. Now, Shadow Systems originally got their start as an aftermarket Glock tune-up place. They would take Glocks and make them fancy and all that good stuff. In 2018, they released the gun, the MR920, which is a multi-roll, which is MR 9mm 9 in the year 2018 pistol that they then later updated in the year 2020, which the MR920, which the gun is currently called. Those guns were pretty cool. They were Glock 19 size. And the MR920, which this is my personal MR920, I have carried this gun for quite a while. I don't carry it anymore since YouTube started having success and I carry all this other random nonsense to make videos for you guys. But this was one of my go-to carry guns for well over a year. It's got over 2,000 to 3,000 rounds. I'm very familiar with this platform. They make really good Glock clones. Because the gun, or a safe action pistol if you want to be more precise, is basically a Glock clone of, it's kind of like a Gen 3, Gen 4 sort of Glock. Now the Foundation series took what was cool about the Elites and they stripped it all down to just what was most important in creating a gun that delivers maximum value to the end user, and that is the new Foundation series of pistols. So that's kind of what we're going to do. We're going to start with talking about the guns, what's different between the Elite series and the regular series, the gun store impressions, kind of what's under the hood you wouldn't notice, shooting impressions, and wrap up with final thoughts. And today's video is sponsored by Vetter Holsters. I have an absolute treat for you guys, so get excited about that. I'll tell you more about it later. And if you get this video to 5,000 likes, I'll do a review on the Shadow Systems DR920P. So be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can check that out. So immediately, someone watching this video might wonder what is the difference between the Elite series of pistol to the Foundation series pistol. So first and foremost, if you just look at the slides, the slide work on the Elite is significantly more advanced. It's got a little window cut. It's got some kind of fancy go fast barrel that's colored, and it's got a spiral fluted barrel, whereas the barrel on the Foundation series gun is just a smooth black barrel like you're used to seeing in pretty much all the other guns. Optic cover plate on the top of the slide is made out of plastic as opposed to being made out of aluminum on the Elite gun. The sights are not quite the same. The rear sight is the same, but the front sight doesn't have the tritium lamp and the high vis yellow. It's just a white dot. It is still plenty usable, and it is still the correct height to co-witness with most optical sights you would want to mount on the gun. The frames are basically identical, except for the fact that the Elite gun comes with a magwell that bolts onto the bottom of the gun. It comes that way out of the box. It does not come on the Foundation gun. It has the hole that accepts the magwell, but doesn't come with the magwell. The other feature that you may notice is if you actually feel the trigger shoe, this looks like the Elite's trigger shoe, but it is a polymer trigger shoe, whereas this has an aluminum trigger shoe that's a little bit thinner. Now, truth told, I think I actually like the profile on the polymer one a little bit better, but they're both very good and very tactile. But everything else on the gun is pretty much the same as far as the guns are concerned. They basically just dialed in like, what do you have to have a high performing, optic ready, concealed carry type gun, and they gave you that and pretty much nothing more. And to that point, you see this fancy Shadow Systems bag? Yeah, you don't get one of those. These guys come with a cardboard box suitable for recycling. Then they come in the box with two PMag magazines, 15 or 17 rounds, depending on which model you get. So that's kind of the difference of the guns. Let's go ahead and talk about first impressions. But first, let's hear from our sponsor, Vetter Holsters.
Nothing's more American than standing in a field looking off into the distance with my Vetter holster. Wait, there it is. Vetter holsters are made in America by Eddie Vetter. Okay, maybe not Eddie Vetter, but they might be distant cousins. Junk carry, Vetter has you covered with their light tuck holster. Outside the waistband, they got you covered with the light draw or pro draw with cool Kydex patterns. You can express yourself through your choices like this holster. Now everyone can know that I like polygons and the color orange. But you better have a gun belt to hold up that fancy holster and your pants. Veta makes belts too. Their low-profile V3 belt has a hook for easy removal. And their quick-release Cobra gun belt is made from 100% real Cobras. Not like the snake, like the enemy to G.I. Joe. Veta holsters.
So let's go into the gun store impressions. So first and foremost, I have one of each size. They basically come in 3 sizes. We'll go small to large. This is the MR multi-roll. This is Glock 19 size. They also have the XR920, which is a full-size grip with a Glock 19 slide. This is like a 19X. And then they have the DR or duty roll, which is the Glock 17 size. So let's talk about the foundation when they first hand it to you. We'll use the MR series because I think this is the one most people are going to be interested in. It is basically the optimum size for a concealed carry gun. When they first hand it to you, you're going to notice, boy, that doesn't point like a Glock at all, because it doesn't. It has a backstrap system which changes out how the gun presents as far as grip angle is concerned. It comes with their medium backstrap on it, which is like more of an MMP or a CZ P10 type grip angle, but it is going to be most natural for a lot of shooters who are used to basically all the other guns in the market. That's the backstrap that I actually carried on my MR920 Elite, and that's the one I would say most people will probably like to use. They come with a small, which makes it point more like a 1911. The large backstrap is going to make it point more like a Glock, so if you're a Glock kind of purist, but you want your Glocks made in Plano, Texas and not Austria, then that option is available to you. The next thing you're going to notice is how well the gun sinks into your hand, and that's a combination of the relief up under the trigger guard and how the gun sits in your hand at the grip tang. It is very, very comfortable. The grip tang, while it keeps the fat part of your hand out of the way of the slide, doesn't necessarily raise the bore axis dramatically. This is still a low bore axis gun. And if you're somebody who likes to put pressure on the frame through your support hand thumb, it has the equivalent of like a ledge or accelerator cuts or whatever you want to call it right there on the gun. The grip texture on the gun is kind of like a medium fissure texture, and it does a pretty good job when you put a lot of pressure on it of kind of sucking the flesh of your hand into the gun and kind of locking itself in place. But really where the frame shines is the geometry, specifically on the MR frame. It's got this little lip at the bottom of the gun, so if you have kind of wider hands, it kind of creates sort of a pinch with the grip tang, so the gun really just kind of locks in your hand nicely. On the bigger framed guns, it doesn't do that quite as bad. The effect isn't as noticeable because my hand doesn't quite hit the lip. My fingers aren't quite that fat, but it still feels very, very good. The sculpt of the grip tang is pretty awesome. My thumb lands naturally right there on the slide stop. Examining the slide, you're going to look at it and think, you know, it's a pretty plain Jane slide, and that's kind of because it's engineered to a price point, so it is pretty squared away. There's nothing fancy about it. The front and rear serrations are plenty usable, but they're not going to like chew up your fingers quite like the aggressive cuts on the MR920R, which has like super serrations on the top of the gun, which are actually really quite usable. The front of the slide is beveled a little bit, so it sort of thins out, so it makes it a little bit easier for you to pinch and manipulate, but it also makes it easier for you to find the opening of your holster, which is why it kind of narrows out like that, which is a nice feature to have. Then you may get onto the trigger and you think, boy, is it going to be like a super enhanced Glock trigger? And I would say that it is, in the fact that when you get on the wall, the trigger is more predictable. It doesn't have quite as much noticeable mush. I mean, there's still mush, but the wall is a little bit more positive than what you're typically going to see on like a Glock trigger, but it is still very much, it's closer to a Glock trigger than it is like a 1911 trigger. But when I pick up the gun and I start taking sight pictures and all that kind of stuff, the sights are pretty good. It's kind of these weird triangular sloping sights at the rear that come to a nice point that make it very natural to kind of create kind of this triangle and aim with it. The magazine catch is kind of a understated affair. It doesn't really stick out too much. Now, under the hood, some of the features that you wouldn't necessarily notice. Now, when you look at the guide rod, you're going to think, boy, that's a plastic guide rod. No, it is a stainless steel nitrided guide rod. Shadow Systems is made in North Texas. When I picked these guns up from them, I got to kind of take a quick tour of the plant, and they showed me their new nitride machine, which is how they do all their slide finishes and barrel finishes, and they even finish their guide rods that way. So they use the same nitride process that HK uses. Like, the other thing that is kind of under the hood that you wouldn't get to explore in the gun store is the optics cut. Now, it is initially going to come with a polymer plate that covers the pocket, which I think is totally suitable. They can do it on the expensive guns as far as I care, but it's going to come with 3 different sets of screws and 3 different spacers. There are no recoil bosses. The optic cut will fit many different optics, and I just tried a couple different ones on there. The new Mechanic MO2, I believe this is called, It is a Dr. footprint sight. It will not fit a Vortex. I tried a Vortex Venom. The Vortex Venom doesn't fit because the rear of the housing is round and it just is a little bit too long for the optic cut. This one fits just fine and co-witnesses very well with the sights. And also I put a SIG Romeo 1 Pro on there, and this one, when I use the shroud, it lifts up the optic body just enough to where the iron sights don't quite co-witness, but they're very, very close. As far as shooting impressions are concerned, I like shooting all these guns. Now these are low bore axis guns, and what that means is they don't have a lot of rotation. So a lot of the energy comes straight back into you, which you then have to mitigate through locking out your wrists, how you do your elbows, shoulders, lats, all that sort of thing is going to affect how the gun shoots, but there's not gonna be a whole lot of muzzle climb. They're very flat shooting guns, and the slides cycle pretty quick. The guns are very, very lightweight, so it is going to take a good bit of a squeeze to kind of control the things, but because the geometry is so squared away on the guns, I found that they were quite pleasant when they were shot at speed, and I was having a good time coming back on target, shooting doubles and things like that. Rapid engagements weren't a problem because my grip is pretty squared away and the guns just, they work well. The accuracy, this is something I want to talk about in these guns. These guns have, I won't say unrivaled accuracy for a polymer striker gun, but it has ridiculous accuracy for a polymer striker gun. But that comes with a price. We'll talk about that more when I come touch back on the negatives, but basically there's a break-in period for the guns. And that's what struck me the most about the MR920 carry gun that I carried for so long, is that it was obscenely accurate. I was able to cloverleaf things at like 15 yards. It was really, really squared away, and the foundation guns do the very same thing. So on to the negatives. The negatives are, well, the gun requires a break-in period. Now, this is Trevor.
Trevor with Shadow Systems.
Trevor is the CEO of Shadow Systems. He put this video on YouTube about a year ago talking about break-in periods on guns. He says a lot of sciencey, gunsmithy stuff, but to kind of distill it all down for you, the essence of what he's saying is that
every gun you've ever owned or shot has a break-in period.
On a Glock style safe action pistol, the accuracy is derived from the lockup of the barrel to the slide. The slide frame doesn't really matter, but this is the critically important piece to get the best accuracy. If they wanted to relieve the hood of the barrel so it didn't lock up quite as tightly with the slide, the gun wouldn't need to be shot in or broken in or whatever it was. Now, I even noticed that on the MR920 when I first got the gun, it would actually, the slide would kind of hang up as it went back into battery. It doesn't do it anymore because the barrel and the slide are well broken in at this point. And with these three guns, I noticed differing levels of it. Like the MR920, basically,
see they do this. This is those first shots through it. While they're breaking in, they do that.
And that was the beginning and the end of the break-in period. The gun stopped doing it from that point there, but I can still, you can kind of see a little bit of a hitch right there as it goes back into battery. If you want to ensure that you're getting the least painful break-in period, if you lubricate the front of the barrel hood right there, that will help with the slide going back into battery so it won't hang out of battery when you drop the slide on it. Now, the XR920 was a similar thing. It actually had, I would say, probably 4 or 5 instances where I had to push the slide into battery on the first 4 or 5 magazines, but that was really the beginning and the end of it. It didn't have much of a break-in period. Now, the DR920 was a different beast. It had a longer break-in period. It was about 150 rounds before it became 100% reliable. It would do the hang out of battery on the first round, but the second or third round in about 2 or 3 magazines when I was first getting started shooting the pistol would fail to go into battery. But at some point, the surfaces all fire fit together and the gun was 100%. Beyond that point where I was like, I think it's broken in. I ran in another entire box of ammunition through the gun and there was no hiccup. So the gun is squared away.
Yeah, we'll do a couple more just to see. Yeah, it's not having problems.
So that is one thing to consider when you're buying one of these, is that you will need to put about 100 rounds through it at the range before you start carrying it. What I would recommend doing, and what I did with all 3 of these pistols, is I shot 2 boxes of ammunition and then I shot the defensive loads that I wanted to try. I shot 3 different defensive loads through the gun, and after 100 rounds, the DR did not like the, I believe it was the 6-hour 124 hollow points.
6-hour 124 JHPs. These feed great. Shorter, it likes shorter cartridges. Didn't like that one.
It didn't like those, it choked on one of them, but both of the other guns ran fine. And the second negative that I'll talk about the gun is the trigger. Now, a lot of gun reviewers are like, it's a really good trigger. So like, it really matters what your experience with triggers are. So I just want to throw this out there. This is my competition gun. It is a Bull Armory Ultimate Racer. The reason I throw that at you is because the trigger on this is like double clicking a mouse. It is 1.5 pounds and there it is. That's it. There's almost no over travel. Like this is what a 10 out of 10 would be like on a trigger gauge scale. Now I show you that not to flex, but simply to paint the picture of what my expectations for triggers are, from very poor, like super heavy double action, or heck, the double action on the Walther PPK is about a 2 on the scale, up to kind of like a race gun style trigger being like a 10, being as good as triggers can be. Shadow Systems trigger is somewhere in the middle with what they've got. It is a safe action trigger, which is an amazing trigger for carry because the gun is actually a double action gun. Like the actual act of pulling the trigger is cocking the striker. So the striker is only partially cocked. It's not a pre-cocked striker. But when you get on the firing pin wall, there is a very solid wall there. And then there's a little bit of over travel, a little bit excessive amount of over travel. And that's honestly a very, very good, very usable trigger. So, final thoughts on the Shadow Systems Foundation series, and which would I pick if you made me pick only one? Now, the answer to that question, we'll go ahead and start with that. The answer to that question is going to be informed by what you're wanting to do with the gun. Now, everybody's going to want something different from the gun. So, if you're going to want to conceal carry a gun and you're worried about printing, then obviously the shorter grip on the MR is going to be the frame that you would want. If you're doing something that requires a lot of gun handling, like shooting IDPA or something like that, then the longer grip on the XR or potentially even the DR is probably what you would want. Now, I'm a bigger guy, so I can get away with hiding any of these guns. And honestly, after shooting them all kind of back to back to back, I actually prefer the MR. The MR, with just the way that the magwell pushes into my pinky, creates an amazing kind of like lock-in on my grip, and the gun just tracks really well. The slide speed's a little bit faster on the 4-inch version versus the 4.5-inch version, so that's kind of my preference as well. It's just a little bit more lively of an experience. The newer shooters out there who want a gentler experience would probably do better with the DR series of pistols because the slide speed's just a little bit slower. It's not as snappy and immediate, and it just kind of is a little bit more predictable. But if you were making me shoot one in competition, I would definitely pick the DR series pistol because the longer slide is better for manipulations. The magwell on these is totally suitable for competition. It's plenty big and it is slightly flared at the bottom of the grip, so it is pretty easy to reload these things. So the DR is probably the pick I would go with for like a competitive shooting sort of context. For home defense, I don't think it necessarily matters. And to that point, I did take my chronograph out there and I used 148 grain hard cast bear defense ammunition.
Got this, what is it? Choice Ammunition 148 grain hard cast bear defense
to test just how much velocity dropped going from the 4.5-inch barrel of the DR to the 4-inch barrel of the MR series pistol. What I found was it was like less than 10 foot per second. So it was almost no velocity loss. And I think with quality hollow point ammunition, that's going to generally be true as well. And that's a testament to the barrels that Shadow Systems is putting out. Shadow puts out amazing barrels, and for the bullets to seal so well in the chamber so that they were getting such consistent velocity, it's a testament to the ammunition, but it's also a testament to the barrels that they're making. So the Shadow Systems has been enjoying a lot of success being sold at like Bass Pro and Cabela's and Shields and stuff like that. And I mean, it's competing very well against the Glocks of the world, because when you hold a Glock and then you hold one of these, you're just like, okay, this is just a little bit extra, and I kind of understand why the price point is different. And I think that I would probably prefer the nicer gun over the, more plain Jane ho-hum ergos aren't as good Glocks. And that's really where I think the Foundation is a shot across the bow of Glock, because at the kind of retail level, you'll be competing on something that's just a little bit more money now. And just, I mean, if you hold these side by side, you're gonna have a hard time convincing yourself to spend the money on a Glock and not one of these. It's just a really nice pistol. So remember to like the video if you want to see that DR920p video. Subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you guys on the next one. I appreciate you guys, and take care.